Amarachi's voice cracked slightly, then strengthened. I choose Oku. The compound erupted. Oku leaped to his feet with a roar of triumph. Emeka's face crumpled like a deflated balloon. Chidi's wooden carving fell from his hands and shattered on the ground. But why? Chidi whispered, his voice breaking. Amarachi's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Because I am tired of being strong. I am tired of fighting alone. I am tired of being pitied and mocked. With Oku, I will have status, security, children who will never know hunger. It may not be love, but it's practical. Practical. Oku boomed, pulling her to her feet. See, brothers. She understands what matters in life. But as he wrapped his arm around her possessively, Amarachi caught sight of her reflection in Chidi's broken carving. The face looking back at her seemed like a stranger, someone who had just traded her dreams for fear. Emeka stood slowly, his dignity intact despite his shattered heart. I wish you happiness, Amarachi. Truly. Chidi gathered the pieces of his broken gift and stumbled away without a word. Only Oku remained, counting his victory while Amarachi wondered if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. That night, the three brothers dealt with the aftermath in characteristically different ways. Emeka walked to the river where he'd played as a child and wept for the first time since his father's death. Not just for his lost love, but for Amarachi herself, for the fear he'd seen in her eyes, for the way she'd flinched when Oku touched her, for the terrible certainty that she'd chosen wrong. I failed her, he whispered to the water. She needed to feel safe enough to choose love, and I couldn't give her that confidence. Chidi went to his workshop and destroyed everything, every carving of Amarachi's face, every gift he'd planned to give her, every piece that reminded him of his foolish dreams. As he fed the flames, he felt his heart breaking not with sadness but with rage. She chose wealth over love, he snarled, watching years of work turn to ash. She's no different from every other woman in this cursed world. But Oku celebrated until dawn, drinking palm wine and accepting congratulations from men who envied his success. In his drunken triumph, he missed the worried looks of the older men, the way the women turned away when he spoke of his victory. The marriage ceremony took place 3 weeks later, and it was everything Oku had promised, magnificent, expensive, attended by dignitaries from neighboring kingdoms. Amarachi was dressed like a queen, her bride price so high it became the stuff of legend. But those who looked closely could see the sadness in her eyes, the way her smile never reached her heart, the careful distance she maintained from her new husband even during the celebration. Emeka and Chidi attended, as tradition demanded, but both left early. Neither could bear to watch Amarachi dance with the man they both knew would destroy her. The village danced and feasted and celebrated, but underneath the joy ran a current of unease. Everyone knew Oku's history with wives. How long would this one last? For the first month, Oku was on his best behavior. He showed Amarachi his vast holdings, introduced her to important people, bought her fine clothes and jewelry. To outsiders, they seemed like the perfect couple, the wealthy man and his beautiful, strong wife. But Amarachi quickly learned that Oku's kindness came with conditions. She was expected to be grateful constantly, to praise his generosity, to agree with his opinions without question. Her role was to be a trophy, beautiful, accomplished, but ultimately silent and obedient. You're my wife now, he would remind her when she expressed an independent thought. Your old life is over. I am your life now. The huge compound that had seemed magnificent during courtship now felt like a beautiful prison. Amarachi had servants, yes, but they answered to Oku. She had fine clothes, but only ones he approved. She had security, but at the cost of her autonomy. Still, she tried to make it work. This was what she'd chosen, what she thought she wanted. Surely she could learn to be content. By the second month, Oku's true nature began to emerge. It started small, criticism disguised as helpful suggestions, demands presented as requests, isolation masked as protection. You don't need to visit the market anymore, he declared one morning. Servants will handle the shopping. A woman of your status shouldn't be seen bargaining with common traders. But I enjoy the market, Amarachi protested. I like choosing my own produce, talking with people. You like it because you're not used to being a wife of importance, Oku replied dismissively. You'll learn. Next came restrictions on her movements. She couldn't visit friends without permission. She couldn't tend her old garden because it looks undignified for my wife to have dirt under her nails. She couldn't even attend village meetings because women should leave important matters to their husbands. This isn't what you promised, Amarachi said one evening as Oku returned from another celebration she'd been forbidden to attend. I promised you security and status, Oku replied coldly. And you have both. What more do you want? I want to be your partner, not your possession. Oku's laugh was harsh. Partner? You're my wife. There's a difference. By the third month, words had escalated to actions. It started with a slap when Amarachi spoke back to him in front of guests. Then came pushes, shoves, and eventually the same brutal beatings that had driven away his previous wives. You're just like the others, Oku would snarl after striking her. Ungrateful. Disrespectful. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me. But Amarachi was not like the others. Years of hard labor had made her strong, and desperation had made her resilient. When Oku raised his hand, she caught it. When he pushed, she pushed back. I am not your previous wives, she declared, her eyes blazing with fury. I will not cower. I will not run. If you want to destroy this marriage, you have to destroy me first. The first time Amarachi fought back, Oku was so shocked he stumbled backward. No woman had ever stood up to him physically. For a moment, something like respect flickered in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by rage at being challenged. Their fights became legendary throughout Umwahia. The sound of their arguments could be heard 3 compounds away. Pots crashed, furniture broke, and both emerged with bruises and torn clothing. The village was divided in their reactions. Some cheered for Amarachi, finally, someone who can match Oku's strength. Others worried for her safety. This will not end well. Oku has never lost a fight. Meanwhile, Emeka and Chidi watched their brother's marriage disintegrate with growing horror and helplessness. Emeka would lie awake at night listening to the sounds of conflict from Oku's compound. Every crash, every shout, every silence felt like a knife in his heart. The woman he loved was suffering, and his own brother was the cause. I should have fought harder for her, he would whisper to the darkness. I should have made her understand that love was stronger than fear. Several times, he started toward their compound to intervene, but each time he stopped. Amarachi had made her choice. She was Oku's wife now. What right did he have to interfere? Chidi's reaction was more volatile. His grief had curdled into bitter anger, at Amarachi for her choice, at Oku for his cruelty, at himself for loving so foolishly. Let them destroy each other, he would mutter, throwing himself into his work with manic intensity. She chose money over love. Let her live with the consequences. But late at night, when his anger cooled, Chidi would carve small figures in secret, scenes of rescue, imagined moments where he saved Amarachi from her torment. These carvings he would burn come morning, ashamed of his persistent hope. 6 months into the marriage, the inevitable happened. During one of their epic battles, Oku struck Amarachi with a heavy wooden club, intending to finally break her spirit. But Amarachi, fueled by months of rage and betrayal, grabbed the club and struck back. The blow cut Oku across the temple, and he fell hard against the stone hearth. For several long minutes, he didn't move. Amarachi stood over him, the club still in her hands, breathing hard. In that moment, she realized she had crossed a line. She had become as violent as her husband, as brutal as the man she'd once pitied. When Oku finally stirred, blood trickling from his head, something had changed in both of them. They stared at each other across the destroyed room, two people who had destroyed themselves in the name of marriage. "This has to stop," Amarachi whispered. For once, Oku had no boastful reply. News of the violent marriage reached the ears of the village elders, who decided they could no longer ignore the situation. A delegation led by Motsi Obayoma, the oldest and wisest man in Umuahia, visited the compound. "This madness must end," Motsi Obayoma declared, his ancient voice carrying the weight of generations. "Marriage is sacred, but it should bring peace, not war. You are disturbing the very spirit of our community." Oku, his head bandaged from Amarachi's blow, tried to salvage his pride. "This is my house, my wife. What happens here is not the village's concern. When the screams wake our children at night, it becomes our concern," another elder replied sternly. "When blood is spilled in anger between husband and wife, it curses the whole community." Amarachi sat silent through most of the meeting, her face bruised but defiant. When asked to speak, she said simply, "I will not be the first to leave this marriage. I made a vow, and I will keep it even if it kills me." The elders exchanged worried glances. This was pride talking, not wisdom. Both Oku and Amarachi had become so invested in winning their private war that they'd lost sight of why they'd married in the first place. Eneni Okafor, the brother's mother, could no longer bear watching her sons destroy themselves. She called all three to her hut for what she knew might be their last conversation as a family. "My sons," she began, her voice heavy with grief, "I have watched you grow from boys who shared everything to men who can barely look at each other without pain. This is not what your father wanted for you." Emeka, always respectful, bowed his head. "Mama, we have done nothing wrong. Oku chose his path. And you chose yours," she replied sharply. "You chose to love the same woman and let that love turn you against each other. You chose pride over family, desire over brotherhood." Chidi laughed bitterly. "What would you have us do, Mama? Pretend we don't love her? Pretend our hearts don't break watching her suffer with him? I would have you remember that you are brothers first," Eneni Okafor said firmly. "Before you were rivals, before you were lovers, before you were enemies, you were my sons, and you were each other's protectors." She turned to Oku, who sat apart from his brothers, his face sullen and defensive. "And you, my youngest son, what have you become? Your father was a gentleman who treated me like a queen. How did I raise a son who believes strength means cruelty? I give her everything," Oku protested. "She wants for nothing. Except love. Except kindness. Except the basic respect every human being deserves." His mother's eyes filled with tears. "You have become something your father would be ashamed to call son." The words hit Oku like physical blows. Despite everything, his mother's opinion still mattered to him. After their mother's intervention, the three brothers found themselves walking together toward the river for the first time in months. The silence between them was thick with unspoken pain. Finally, by the old Iroko tree where they played as children, Emeka spoke. "We cannot continue like this. Our hatred is killing us all, including her." Chidi kicked at the dirt, his anger still burning. "She made her choice, Emeka. She chose money over love, security over happiness. Why should we suffer for her mistake?" "Because we love her," Emeka replied simply. "And because she's suffering." "She's suffering?" Oku exploded. "What about me? She fights me every day, challenges me in front of servants, refuses to show me the respect a husband deserves. You want respect?" Chidi turned on his youngest brother, his eyes blazing. "Then act like a man worth respecting. You treat her like a farm animal, beat her like a disobedient child, and wonder why she fights back." For a moment, It looked like the brothers might come to blows themselves. But then Emeka stepped between them, his gentle presence somehow diffusing the tension. "We all made mistakes," he said quietly. "I should have fought harder to show her that love was safe. Chidi, your love was so intense it frightened her. And Oku, brother, you offered her everything except what she truly needed." "Which was what?" Oku demanded. "To be seen as an equal. To be valued for who she was, not what she could provide." The three brothers stood in the gathering dusk, each lost in his own thoughts. The sounds of their childhood seemed to echo from the river, laughter, arguments, the innocent games of boys who had once shared everything. "What do we do now?" Chidi asked, his anger finally giving way to exhaustion. None of them had an answer. What happened next was unprecedented in the history of Umuahia. The two rejected brothers began secretly working together to protect the woman who had rejected them both. It started when Emeka noticed Amarachi at the market, moving slowly, wincing with each step. Her face was swollen, her wrists bore the marks of rope burns. Oku had escalated beyond beating her, he was now tying her up when she misbehaved. That night, Emeka did something that went against every tradition he'd been raised with. He climbed the fence of his brother's compound and left medicine by Amarachi's window, along with a note, "You are not alone." When Chidi learned what Emeka was doing, his artistic heart was stirred despite his bitter words. He began leaving small carvings, not romantic gifts this time, but symbols of strength, endurance, hope. A lioness protecting her cubs. A tree that bent in storms but never broke. A butterfly emerging from a cocoon. Neither brother told the other what he was doing, but Amarachi understood. In her darkest hour, when her own choices seemed to have trapped her in hell, love was still finding ways to reach her. The secret gift gave her strength to keep fighting, to keep surviving each day of her nightmare marriage. By their first wedding anniversary, Oku and Amarachi's marriage had become a war zone that consumed everything in its path. Neither would surrender, neither would compromise. Both were destroying themselves to avoid losing face. The final crisis began over something trivial, burned soup. Amarachi, exhausted from another sleepless night of arguments, had fallen asleep while cooking. The soup scorched, filling the compound with acrid smoke. Oku's rage was immediate and volcanic. In his mind, this was the ultimate disrespect. His wife was so indifferent to his needs that she couldn't even stay awake to cook his meals properly. "You did this on purpose," he roared, grabbing her by the shoulders. "You're trying to humiliate me." "It was an accident." Amarachi protested, but Oku was beyond reason. What followed was their most violent fight yet. Oku, driven by a year's worth of accumulated fury and wounded pride, lost all control. He grabbed a machete from the kitchen, not to kill, but to threaten, to finally break her spirit through fear. "I should have listened to everyone who told me you were cursed," he screamed, waving the blade. "You've brought nothing but trouble to my house." But Amarachi, seeing the machete, felt something snap inside her. All her fear transformed into pure, crystallized rage. "Cursed," she snarled, grabbing a heavy pestle. "You want to see cursed? I'll show you cursed." The sound of their final battle was unlike anything Umuahia had ever heard: crashes, screams, the ring of metal against wood. Windows shattered, furniture exploded, and over it all, the voices of two people pushed beyond all human endurance. Both Emeka and Chidi heard the sounds from their respective compounds and knew, with the certainty of shed blood, that this night would end in death. Without consultation, without planning, both brothers began running toward Oku's compound. Villagers emerged from their huts, following the sounds of destruction, but the brothers arrived first. They found the gate locked and climbed the fence together, enemies united by a love stronger than their rivalry. In the courtyard, they saw a scene from nightmares. Oku and Amarachi circled each other like wild animals, both bloodied, both beyond reason. He held the machete, she wielded the pestle, and murder lived in both their eyes. Enough! Emeka roared, his gentle voice carrying with authority he'd never known he possessed. For a moment, both combatants froze, startled by the interruption. "Brothers," Amarachi whispered, her voice broken. "You shouldn't, this isn't your fight." "Yes, it is," Chidi said firmly, stepping into the compound. "It became our fight the moment we loved you. All of us." What happened next would be told and retold for generations. 3 brothers and 1 woman, facing the wreckage of choices that had destroyed them all. "You don't understand," Oku said, still gripping his machete. "She's trying to destroy me. Every day, she fights me, challenges me, makes me look weak." "Because you are weak," Emeka said sadly. "Strong men don't need to break women to feel powerful." "Love doesn't conquer through force," Chidi added. "It conquers through surrender." For a moment, something flickered in Oku's eyes: recognition, regret, the memory of the boy he'd once been. But then pride reasserted itself. "Easy words from men who lost," he sneered. "She chose me. She's mine. I never belonged to any of you," Amarachi said quietly, and her words fell into the sudden silence like stones into still water. "I chose you, Oku, out of fear. I rejected you, Emeka and Chidi, out of fear. And fear has destroyed us all." She looked at each brother in turn, her eyes full of a terrible clarity. "You loved the idea of me, but none of you saw who I really was. I was so desperate to be chosen that I forgot to choose myself." "What are you saying?" Chidi whispered. "I'm saying that this marriage is killing us all. Not just me and Oku, but all of us. Our love has become poison." In that moment of truth, when honesty might have saved them all, fate intervened with cruel timing. The village elders, having heard the commotion, arrived with torches and angry voices. "Enough of this madness!" Motsi Obioma shouted. "This ends now." The sudden appearance of the crowd startled everyone. Oku, still holding the machete, spun toward the voices. Amarachi, thinking he was turning to attack the elders, raised her pestle to stop him. Chidi, seeing Amarachi move, lunged forward to protect her from Oku's blade. Emeka, seeing his youngest brother threatened, reached for the machete to disarm him. In the chaos of movement, in the confusion of shadows and torchlight, in the terrible mathematics of violence, 4 people who had once loved each other became tangled in tragedy. The machete, meant for no one, found Amarachi's heart. The pestle, swung in defense, cracked Oku's skull. The brothers' hands, reaching to save and protect, became instruments of destruction. When the dust settled and the screams faded, 2 bodies lay still in the blood-soaked courtyard. Amarachi, the woman they had all loved, stared at the night sky with unseeing eyes, her hand reaching toward something none of them could see. Oku, the brother who had won and lost everything, breathed his last with his siblings' names on his lips. The double funeral that followed was unlike anything Umuahia had ever witnessed. The entire kingdom came to mourn, not just for the dead, but for the living who had destroyed themselves with love. Emeka and Chidi, broken by grief and guilt, stood side by side at the graveside. The rivalry that had consumed them seemed insignificant now, dwarfed by the magnitude of their loss. "We killed them," Chidi whispered as the earth fell on the twin coffins. "No," Emeka replied, his voice hollow. "We killed ourselves. They just had to die for us to realize it." Neither surviving brother ever married. They returned to their mother's compound and lived as they had as children, sharing everything, supporting each other, but carrying the weight of their tragedy like stones in their chest. Emeka continued farming, but his gentle nature was forever shadowed by sorrow. Children who had once run to him for stories now approached carefully, sensing the deep sadness that emanated from him like heat from a fire. Chidi never carved again. His hands, once capable of creating beauty from wood, could no longer hold tools without trembling. He became a teacher instead, passing on the old stories to young people, always ending with the same warning. Love without wisdom is the cruelest destroyer of all. Years later, when the pain had dulled to a manageable ache, the brothers would sit beneath the old Iroko tree by the river and speak of what they had learned. We loved her, Emeka would say, but we didn't know how to love ourselves. She needed us to be whole, Chidi would reply, but we were all broken in different ways. And Oku, he thought love was possession. He never understood that love is liberation. In the end, we all failed her. And she failed herself. The tree that had sheltered their childhood games now witnessed their adult wisdom, too late to save anyone, but perhaps not too late to warn others. On Amarachi's grave, the village carved these words. Here lies a woman who was loved by 3 good hearts, but chose with fear instead of faith. Here lies the proof that love without wisdom destroys both the lover and beloved. May her spirit find the peace that her choices could not give her. And on Oku's grave, here lies a man who mistook ownership for love, control for strength, fear for respect. His wealth could buy everything, except the one thing that mattered: the ability to cherish what he claimed to treasure. The story of the 3 brothers and Amarachi became a cautionary tale told throughout the region. Mothers would warn their daughters, choose with your heart, not your fears. Fathers would tell their sons, love is not conquest, it is service. And in the palm wine joints where Oku had once boasted, men would grow quiet when someone spoke too proudly of possessing women, remembering the fate of the iron rooster who forgot that lovebirds cannot be caged. The Iroko tree by the river still stands, they say, and sometimes on quiet evenings, you can hear the whispers of 3 brothers and 1 woman, finally at peace, finally understanding what they could not grasp in life. That love is not about winning or losing, choosing or rejecting, possessing or being possessed. Love is about seeing clearly, choosing wisely, and accepting that sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to let go. But for Emeka, Chidi, Oku, and Amarachi, this wisdom came too late. And so their story ends not with triumph, but with the terrible beauty of truth learned through tragedy, the kind of ending that makes the listeners weep not for what was, but for what might have been.